February 2nd, 2026. In the dead of night, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once His Royal Highness, was quietly driven from Royal Lodge, stripped of titles and allies. When he arrived at Wood Farm Cottage, Sandringham staff had already been told no thanks, that their service was optional, and many simply refused. What could make a British prince so unwelcome in his own house? The answer and the consequences go far deeper than a family falling out. This story exposes how privilege, secrecy, and public outrage collided to end a royal life, and what happened next changed the monarchy forever. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's departure from Royal Lodge was not the exit of a favored son, it was the evacuation of a man out of options. On the night of February 2nd, 2026, just after sunset, he was escorted from the 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park, his home for over 2 decades, without ceremony or public notice. The move was abrupt, timed to avoid cameras and headlines, and confirmed by police incident reports and multiple national outlets. Storage vans arrived in darkness. By the time dawn broke over Windsor, Andrew was already miles away, heading east to Wood Farm Cottage on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. The removal was not voluntary. After months of mounting pressure, Andrew had surrendered the lease that once let him occupy Royal Lodge for a token rent, a privilege now viewed as intolerable. His new status was plain. He was no longer His Royal Highness. He was no longer the Duke of York. He was simply Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, stripped of titles by order of his brother, King Charles. The destination, Wood Farm, had served as Prince Philip's quiet retreat, and now it was a holding pen for a royal exile. There was no welcoming committee. Reports from inside Sandringham made clear that staff had been told their service was optional. Some said no thanks outright, refusing to cook or clean for the former prince. For a man raised with every comfort, the silence and rejection were unmistakable. The message from the royal household was blunt. Privilege had its limits, and the line had finally been drawn. Inside Wood Farm Cottage, the rules of royal life no longer applied. The Sandringham estate staff, long accustomed to serving the Queen and Prince Philip, had received quiet instructions. Their service to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was now voluntary. For the first time in his life, a member of the royal household could be told, quite plainly, no thanks. Senior staff, some with decades of loyal service, declined to cook his meals or clean his rooms. Others simply stayed away, leaving the former prince to fend for himself in the echoing quiet of a house that once bustled with activity. The message was unmistakable. He was no longer owed deference, not even the basic courtesies extended to distant cousins or minor royals. This was not a protest or a union dispute. It was a silent verdict from the people who had, for years, witnessed the realities behind palace walls. Their refusal to serve spoke as loudly as any public statement from Buckingham Palace. For Andrew, the absence of staff was not just an inconvenience. It was a daily reminder that his status had changed in ways that could not be undone by apology or explanation. The social contract that once shielded him from consequence had been revoked. The humiliation was not just private, it was institutional, woven into the very fabric of royal protocol. The workforce at Sandringham had become a barometer of his standing, and the reading was clear. Exile meant exclusion, even from the routines of everyday royal life. In 2003, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor secured a 75-year lease on Royal Lodge, a sprawling 30-room mansion set in Windsor Great Park. The arrangement seemed almost too generous to be true. For a single upfront payment of £1 million and a commitment to spend at least £7.5 million on the renovations, Andrew was granted exclusive use of a property valued at over £30 million. The annual rent was officially 1 peppercorn if demanded, a centuries-old legal formality that meant he paid nothing in practice. This lease was not a private family arrangement, but a contract with the Crown Estate, whose profits help fund the sovereign grant, the public money that supports the monarchy. As the years passed, the contrast between the property's value and the symbolic rent drew sharp criticism. Members of Parliament began to question whether the public was being shortchanged. In October 2025, the Public Accounts Committee announced a formal inquiry into the Crown Estate's royal leases, with Andrew's deal at the center of their investigation. The committee's review revealed the full scope of the agreement, a 75-year term, no rent reviews, and no market rate payments. The Crown Estate's own report described Royal Lodge as dilapidated, casting doubt on any compensation Andrew might claim for surrendering the lease early. By the time Buckingham Palace announced he would vacate the property, The lease had become a symbol of royal privilege unchecked by public scrutiny. The scandal over the peppercorn rent was no longer just a matter of accounting. It was a catalyst for Andrew's exile and a warning to the institution that had shielded him for so long. On January 30th, 2026, the U.S. Department of Justice released a vast cache of documents from the Epstein investigation. The files, millions of pages, thousands of images, contained material that had been shielded for years. Among them were a series of emails from 2010, one referencing the Duke, in language unmistakably tied to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. A photo log surfaced as well, showing images that placed Andrew at Royal Lodge with individuals linked to Epstein's circle. One email described a 26-year-old woman as clever, beautiful, trustworthy, with Epstein offering to introduce her to Andrew. Another thread referenced travel plans and meetings in the UK, with Royal Lodge named directly for the first time in connection to a survivor's allegation. The release did not bring criminal charges, but it changed the landscape overnight. Thames Valley Police, responsible for Windsor, issued a public statement. They said, "We are aware of reports about a woman said to have been taken to an address in Windsor in 2010 for sexual purposes. We are assessing the information in line with our established procedures." The wording was careful, an assessment, not an accusation, but the implication was clear. For the first time, a British law enforcement agency was publicly weighing evidence that connected Andrew's private residence to the wider Epstein network. The legal process had not caught up, but the evidentiary trigger was undeniable. The scandal was no longer confined to rumor or civil settlement. It had become a matter for police scrutiny, and the consequences for Andrew's standing were immediate and irreversible. On October 30th, 2025, Buckingham Palace released a statement that broke with more than a century of tradition. Effective immediately, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was to be stripped of all remaining royal titles and styles. The communiqué was brief, almost clinical. The king has directed that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor will no longer hold or use any royal title, military honor, or style of address. There was no room for ambiguity. The order covered every distinction: Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, Baron Killalay, and the right to be called His Royal Highness. In the history of the modern monarchy, such a complete revocation had not occurred since the aftermath of Edward VIII's abdication in 1936. Even then, the language was less total. The decision was not the result of a single scandal, but the accumulation of failures, financial, moral, and legal. King Charles, acting as both brother and sovereign, made the call himself. The palace made clear that this was not a negotiated exit, but a royal command. There would be no titles in exile, no ceremonial role, no path back to public duty. The disgrace was not only personal, it was institutional. For Andrew, the loss was absolute and irreversible, a public erasure from the royal ledger. The monarchy had drawn a line that even blood could not cross. In February 2022, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor reached a confidential settlement with Virginia Giuffre, the woman who had accused him of sexual abuse when she was 17. The estimated figure, £12 million, never confirmed by a court, became a symbol of the monarchy's desire to end the scandal quietly, but the silence did not last. On April 25, 2025, Giuffre's death by suicide was reported across major outlets, sending shockwaves through both sides of the Atlantic. In the months that followed, her memoir, published posthumously under the title Nobody's Girl, reignited public anger and drew new scrutiny to Andrew's conduct. The book's release coincided with political leaders in Britain and the United States calling for Andrew to testify under oath, with the Prime Minister urging full accountability and U.S. officials stating that no one is above the law. Giuffre's family spoke out in her absence. Her brother, Sky Roberts, said, "Today an ordinary American girl brought down a British prince." The words echoed through Parliament and the press, stripping away any remaining sense of royal immunity. As Easter 2026 approached, plans were underway for Andrew to be moved again, this time to Marsh Farm, a more remote corner of the Sandringham estate. The exile was no longer just physical or legal, it was moral, enforced by the memory of a woman whose voice could not be silenced by settlements or titles. For Andrew, the prospect of redemption had faded. The monarchy had drawn its line, and the world was watching to see if it would ever move again. Today, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor lives without title, privilege, or public role. His disgrace is complete. Parliamentary scrutiny of royal finances intensifies, while allegations still under police review cast a permanent shadow. For Britain's monarchy, the cost of silence is now measured in public trust, lost perhaps for good. Share your thoughts below.